Welcome to my latest video. This is part 1 and 2-part series for the freehand on the cloaks of the Death Shroud Terminators I've been painting for you. You'll have to excuse me, I've managed to pick up a cold on Sunday from the Golden Demon painting competition. Obviously some Nurgle follower has gifted me with his disease. But on the plus side, I managed to get a gold trophy for entering these into the Golden Demon in the squad category. So it's a fair trade, I think. The model that you see on the screen is the champion of the squad. I used that as a test piece prior to recording the video, so that I had a rough idea of what I was going to do for the rest of the squad, because I didn't want to go into it blind recording things and not know exactly how I was going to make it look. So I'll be painting. Actually, it'll be a mashup of the two other models. Here you can see the first of them. It'll be on this second video that I use the next model. So here's the original champion again, and you'll notice that because due to the brightness of the light and how zoomed in it is, you can really see the faults in the painting, all the roughness and brush strokes and things like that, which isn't so nice for me, but it's good for you because you can see a lot easier how the model was painted. So the colours that I'm using are being displayed on the screen now. They'll also be written in the description of the video, so don't worry if you don't manage to catch them. One note is the ice yellow that popped up there. In previous videos where I've painted skulls and things, I've actually used Vallejo watercolour buff. I didn't purposefully pick ice yellow, it's just that the colours were so similar and I didn't look at the name and I just picked it up. So that shows you how much the specific colours that I use are important. They aren't at all. On the cloak that I'm using here, you've seen, or should have seen hopefully in the previous video, how to paint the cloaks. In this particular case though, I have used AK Interactive ultra matte varnish, ultra matte, and that took some of the shine off that you won't have seen in the video, but I did it afterwards because I really wanted the cloak to look a bit flatter and dustier. You can see on the wet palette there some of my colours are bled together. It's not really important, you've still got the original colours available too, but there's the bleeding in together just gives you more options with transitions and things, so don't worry about that happening on your wet palette. I personally prefer my colours not to mix, but it's not important. As I said, I do have a cold. So I'm using the Vallejo Heavy Brown. The main reason for that is that it's a very opaque colour. It actually says that on the bottle if you read it. They're specifically designed to be one coat, or as close to one coat depending on how much you thin them down. So that allows me to have very thin coats while still making strong outline shapes onto the cloak, and not have to worry about going over it lots. I can just get the shape down and then hopefully move on to the more important details, because the skull on this one is purely base and outline work ready for the zombie face to go on top. So they're not skulls that I'm painting on it, they're rotten under, well, or Nurgle type faces. The reason for that is on the background for the Death Shroud Terminators originally, their identities were hidden, and I thought it would be pretty cool that now that they've been corrupted by Nurgle, that their faces are represented on their cloaks at the back, so each face is going to be an individual piece, not they're not going to be copies of each other, but it makes it more interesting to do rather than doing 3 copies. They also will have 3 eyes on each one, and the position of the eyes on each socket will change depending on which model it is. I chose to go with 3 eyes because it's the 3 is like the symbol of Nurgle with the 3 brown things. I'm not sure why it uses 3 things because the number of Nurgle is 7, but there you go. You will only see me painting this cloak on this video. On the second video, I'm going to be painting the 3rd member of the squad for painting the zombie flesh on. The reason for that is that there's a big hole right in the middle of this cloak, and that hole just happens to be where I want to paint the teeth. And I decided after I'd got most of the work down on this one that it actually wouldn't be that useful for a video if you can't see all the details that I want to paint. But it is handy that I'm painting it now, because then you can see the difficulties of painting on these uneven surfaces with extra details on. You have to work around these issues while painting the freehand. What you're seeing here is I'm just using the black to paint firstly 3 quick dots on, so that I can roughly mark where the eyes are going to be. Now I know it doesn't look like they're evenly placed in the video, but that's because 1, it's at an angle, and 2, there's some extreme folds that are warping the shape of the skull. Although you've seen me paint skulls previously in other videos, and this one is a much greater challenge due to the folds and holes in it. The folds actually shrink the width of the skull, because obviously it's a larger surface area in a smaller space, which gives you a really large issue. And the issue is, are you going to paint it to be aesthetic with the cloak so that it fills the space nicely? Because it seems to me that when the designer made the cloak, he's put these folds in, but if you actually stretched out the fabric so it was flat, it would be really wide and it wouldn't be an even shape. So the folds have been put on just to look good, but that makes it really hard for painting freehand, because then you're either stuck with painting it so that it would look accurate if it was stretched out, in which case the folds are going to make it look really thin, or you paint it so that it kind of cheats a little bit. But then somebody might say, especially judges, oh, that skull would be too wide if those folds weren't there. So you kind of have to hit a middle ground. So I'm just knitting up the eye sockets here. One other thing to point out is the shape of the eye sockets. So the 2 normal eye positions are roughly the shape of how an eye socket would be, whereas the one in the forehead is the shape of an eye. The reason for that is I don't actually know what the shape of an eye socket would be on your forehead. The eye sockets that you have in your skull are that shape for a specific reason, and they fit around the details on your skull and are reinforced by your brow ridge, which is obviously a strong point on your face, and things like that, and influenced by the nose and cheeks and things, where none of those details are on the forehead. So I went with that shape because it will still fit an eye in it, and I can paint flesh on top and around it and make it look interesting anyway. And that's one of the issues that you have when you're painting things that don't have reference, when you have to make them up, is that you have to make them up, so they you have to hope they look alright. with whatever idea you come up with for why they're like that. So I've been using the Rhinox hide to paint in some of the details. It's very rough work. Well, it's details and shadow positions, so you can see the shadows to the right hand side of the nose. It's quite heavy there, and shadows in the temples and things like that. All these things are going to be painted over once in part 2 of the video when the flesh goes on, but it's really handy to have them on now, because although the flesh will cover it, there will be, because it's a zombie face and there's going to be bits of flesh falling off, you can see the skull underneath. So if you have all these details painted on, when you're painting the flesh, you can leave these gaps and you already have the base work underneath ready to just to finish off and add those details on. It makes your life easier, and also because painting in these details now will affect the shape of the flesh still. Because the zombie flesh is all fallen off and things like that, you can't just look at a face and say that's how it looks, because it's going to be like decomposing, and it'll follow the shape of the skull. So having the skull painted on allows you to just paint the flesh following those contours already. It does mean it's extra work, and if you wanted to, you could just go straight into painting a zombie face straight off, but I preferred this method for this particular case, especially because the folds on the cloak are already making my life hard. So anything to make the painting and positioning of things easier is a big help. The hole on the cloak is really very irritating, because you can't put any of the details on for the teeth, which are quite important when painting a skull. They're right up there along with the shape of the eyes. If you can't see the eyes or the teeth on a skull, you've only got a rough light bulb shape. So I was really disappointed when I realised that, because I'd already set out the plan of painting these 3 zombie heads on, then I realised that I don't have any way to work around this design. If I want to keep the zombie heads, I have to paint the zombie heads in the middle of these cloaks. So you'll be able to see how I combat that at the end of the second video, and you'll be able to, because although I'm going to use the third model to paint so you can see the teeth and things, I'll also show you the final version of this for how I've done my best to still make it look like a zombie, even though you can't see the middle of the face. Now I'm using some of the highlight colours, the Cork brown still, and also the ice yellow. You could use ivory as well. I like the ice yellow or buff colour, because it just has a bit of yellow in, so it's not such a stark contrast. It adds a bit of warmth to the model. Makes it a bit interesting. If you just have very desaturated colours all the time, you can look a bit cold and lifeless, which you might think, well, that's good to go for a zombie type look, but I prefer to get the warmer colour on. As the other colours that I've used in the model, it helps to work with those a bit more. So I'm going back and I'm using the Battlefield Brown now just to shade in some of the heavy brown areas and add a bit more darkness and detail to the model. As you can see, it's very, very rough. Excuse me. You don't have to spend ages blending it all, things like that. In fact, that's as far as I'm actually going to go in this video. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you're looking forward to part 2, where I'll actually go into a lot more detail and it'll be much more interesting. As you see, I get to work on some zombie flesh. Thank you very much.